Hi, I'm Paul. Welcome to MIG Monday. You know, for the last few weeks that you've been doing these programs, we've talked about different MIG welding problems, what makes a good weld, a bad weld, what causes problems. And I know a couple of times we've promised you that we're going to maybe do a project that you can duplicate at home. And so today we're going to actually start doing that. And I thought, well, what would be a good starting project? If we're going to be doing welding, what's a better choice than making a welding table for home? So that's what we're going to do. You can see here in the front, I've got some of the things that we're going to need laid out. It's going to involve some measuring, it's going to involve plasma cutting, welding, but what we're going to do is start with the base. The way this table is going to work is, well, this piece that's right here is going to be the base. Now, first of all, you might see, well, that's kind of small and might be tippy because of just the dimensions of it, but the table that we're going to build is going to be designed to be lagged down to the floor, so tippiness or stability isn't going to be an issue. If you want to duplicate this project, you might have to upsize the base a little bit and make it maybe a heavier material so that you have stability, because you really don't want to be welding on something and have it tip over on you. So that's primary importance right there. But what we're going to do is in the middle of this base, we're going to put a pipe. We're going to weld a pipe 90 degrees up from the base. And then we're going to take a smaller diameter pipe that will fit inside the original pipe. The idea of that is that when we put this table on here and a welding arm on there, we can be able to raise or lower those by sliding the inside pipe up or down. Some of that might sound a little odd, but it'll come together as we work on the program. And besides having the pipe sticking up from the base, you have to have some way of really making it strong because of the usage that it's going to get. So we're going to cut some gussets to even stabilize that pipe. And so that's what we're going to actually start to do. There are some things that are basic things you're going to need to get. At some point we'll put a parts list up so that you can see exactly what we used. There's no ironclad rule that you have to use exactly what we use, but you have to follow with common sense for sizes and things like that. But you can certainly adapt this arm to your own measurements if you need to. So basically we got some sheet steel, 1/4 inch pieces, 3/16 pieces. We're going to need a variety of tools. We're going to need a grinder, a level, maybe a T-square, some clamps, all the things that typically you would need to make any kind of project anyway. So what we're going to do is we're going to get started cutting and measuring, or measuring and cutting actually, and we'll go from there. So let me get started here and we'll start doing some measurements. All right, this piece is going to be my base. This piece we'll utilize this piece later on. Right now I'm just using it as a straight edge. And what I've done is I've just gone from corner to corner on the piece that's going to become my base, because I want to find the center. So I got a marker here. I can go with the approximation of where it is and just make a line. And then I can basically just do the same thing on this side, like so. Make a line. And now I have the center of my base. Now I want to just use a hammer and a punch. Just put the punch right in the center of that little X that's right there. Okay, now I've made a little indent on the piece, and that's good to go. These pieces are going to be gussets. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just cut diagonal here. I'll have to plasma cut these at a diagonal, and then now you can imagine it as a long triangle, and that's going to be mounted against the pipe and extend to one corner. And I'll do that because I'm going to cut this in half, and this one in half. We'll have 4 expanding out each way, and that'll be the brace for the column or the pipes that we're going to put down there. All right, so basically we're going to just do the same thing again, only this time, instead of just making an X in the center, I'm going to go essentially from corner to corner. Like so. All right. So that takes care of the measuring, or the, well, it's actually, to be technical, I haven't actually measured anything. I've just made lines on stuff, but that gives you the guide for where I'm going to cut with the plasma cutter and where our centerpiece or our pipe that's going to support all this stuff is going to go. All right? So next step is to cut these pieces and start going. Okay, what I've got now is I'm going to use my plasma cutter to cut this angle. And I just want you to note what I've done here is I have the piece I want to cut clamped to the table, but I have it clamped over the edge of the table. I've had too many people tell me about forgetting to move the cut piece off the table, and they've cut it right on their table, and then what they end up is a piece that's actually welded to the table. So make sure it's overhanging the table. And then this long piece that I have clamped here, I'm using that as a fence, very similar to if you're familiar with a table saw, how you have a fence, you can run the piece of wood down and the fence acts as a guide. That's what I'm using here. This plasma cutter that I'm using, if you can see here, this silver end here, that's a standoff. I don't know how close you can see that, but the edges of this standoff are a little further up than the end of the contact tip, so that when it's on the work, like so, a correct distance is held from the contact tip to the work for cutting purposes. Then you just slide that along the work, and you keep a steady standoff distance. Along with that, by putting it on here, I could just use this as a guide, come right down the line, have a nice straight cut. I mean, maybe once there was a time I could count on my shaky self to make a straight cut, but I can't do that anymore, so I use a fence whenever I can. And that's actually a pretty good idea. All right, so plasma cutter, they all work pretty much the same. There's a rule of thumb about the settings. A lot of people just put it up to the top setting and let it go. However, a kind of a rule of thumb to follow is a 1/1000th of material thickness per amp. So if you got a 1/2-inch piece, you use 50 amps of power. That's kind of a rough, that gets you in the ballpark. It's nothing that I would take to the bank for sure, but it's a good guide. As far as airflow, you're going to want somewhere between 50 and 75 pounds pressure on the airflow. I think I have this one set right about 60 pounds, is kind of somewhere in the center. So with that, I'm going to make this cut and we'll see where we end up, okay? So here we go. Okay, I don't know if you guys can still hear me because I got the air compressor running there in the background. One of the hazards of doing this kind of stuff. But you can see it's a nice clean cut. Probably way better than I could have done freehand. The melded material on the bottom side is called dross, and that typically just comes off with a chipping hammer, so you don't have all kinds of grinding and stuff to do. So, cleans up pretty easily. All right, so there's the first cut from our project. Okay, we've got a couple of cut pieces now, and I just want to give you a quick idea of what we're doing with that. We haven't cut our pipe yet, so I can't use that because that section happens to be like 10 feet long. I'm going to use this bottle. Just envision this as being the pipe that we're eventually going to weld to this table. The idea of these gussets or supports, whatever you care to choose, we're going to weld those in place just like so, so that they support the edge of the table so that it doesn't bend and flex when you have welding projects on it. Now this is the base, okay? So this is, I guess I kind of misspoke, because what we actually are doing with this is we're keeping the pipe extra support so it doesn't bend and everything. This is going to be on the floor, so it's not going to bend or flex. It's the pipe that we're supporting. Now, contrary or opposite of that is the welding table. Let me get that up here without cutting my little fingertips. Okay. Now the table, we're going to cut a little notch in the table so the pipe comes right up here like so. Now, with this material, if it's just welded here, heck, by putting your weight against it, you could bend this table. And we certainly want that to happen. So we're also going to cut a couple of more pieces, and they're going to go on here like so to be the support edge for the table so it doesn't bend and it stays nice and rigid. Okay? So we're going to cut a couple pieces for that. All right, we've got our pieces cut that are going to be gussets, supports, whatever you choose to call them. It's not really a finished piece. The cut was pretty nice and straight, but it's still rough, and you could still cut yourself on it. It's going to be under the table. You know, if your knee comes up under there or you reach under there for something, it's not going to be rough. And then plus just a nice finish touch to the project to make it look as professional as possible. The thing to do would be to grind these nice and smooth and even bevel the edge a little bit so you don't have any sharp edges. So that's what I'm going to do now. This is the least fun part of the whole project is the grinding. But I've got a piece clamped in the vise here, and what I'm going to do is just run the grinder up and down until I get it nice and smooth, and then we'll just go on to the next piece. All right? So here we go. It's going to be pretty noisy. Of course, it's going to be more my problem than yours. Okay, there we have a piece that we've ground, and you can compare it. It just looks a lot nicer. And then if you're going to paint your table and everything, it's just going to look like a much more professional job. So I suggest that you do that. And then we can even smooth it a little bit more with a file, break the edges with a file so it's nice and smooth too. So, but anyway, this is the general idea what I'm going to do to the rest of these pieces. So that's going to take me a while, but we're going to get it done. All right, we've got our gussets cut. We've cleaned them up a little bit. Now it's time to cut the length of pipe that we're going to use. This is a fairly arbitrary thing for you. You can use whatever length you feel most comfortable with. I think I'm going to cut off a piece of about 4 foot to be my base pipe that the table is going to connect to and everything. This happens to be 2.5 inch in diameter on the OD. And it's fairly thin wall stuff. It's only about a 1/16 of an inch thick. But I'm going to cut a 4 foot section off of this, and then the pipe that's going to slide in and out is a 2 1/8 inch OD, also thin wall. I'm going to cut off about a 3 foot section of that, and that will slide inside here, and then I can make my adjustments for raising or lowering the welding arm that would be above the table that we're going to have. So let's make this off. I'm just going to measure down 4 feet. And 4 feet is right there. I'm just going to make a little mark here. Take it over to the saw and cut it. Before I do that, I'll get the other piece up. You see this is a pretty long piece. I had to buy 10-foot sections here because that was all that was available at the time, but you certainly don't have to buy a 10-foot piece. You can, whatever suits your need as far as what you feel your height on this is going to be, you can go ahead and do that. And again, I just kind of arbitrarily chose to do a 3 foot section for the piece that's going to slide up and down. And once again, you can determine whatever length works for you. But I figure if I have a 4 foot piece and a 3 foot piece, figuring I can have an actual adjustment of about a 2 foot rise, why I think that'll be plenty for anything I'm going to encounter. So once again, we just put a little mark. And then we go on over to the saw. I'm lucky I have a an actual automatic bandsaw to be able to cut this on. At home, you may just have to work through it with a hacksaw or whatever other mean you choose to cut your pipe with. All right, so let's go get this cut. Okay, now what I need to do is mark on the piece that's going to become our table where I want my post to go. And I've chosen to have it just off center, well not off center, but on center, but just off the plate a little bit. What I need to do is find the middle of the plate. And of course, this is a 12-foot plate, so the middle is the 6-inch point. And this can be, you can kind of do this real quick. There's only, if you're laying a piece of pipe down like this, there's only one contact point. So I'm just going to set this on here, and where the high point of the pipe is, at 6 inches, I'm going to hold that in place, take my marker, hold that down, and just go around like so. And with that, then I will be, cut that out with the plasma cutter, and we should be ready to go. And while I'm at it with the plasma cutter, I am going to do one more thing. You notice the edges on this table. If you're like me and you're in your shop and you drop stuff and you bend down to get it, you're going to spear your forehead right on a corner here. So what I'm going to do, just to be a little bit on the safe side, is I'm just going to take the plasma cutter and I'm just going to cut off a little bit of the corner on each side. I'll round it a little bit with the grinder after I cut it off. And then with it a little bit rounded, at least then when I bang my head, I'll just get a lump instead of a big gouge. All right, so let's start and take care of this now, and we'll get this show on the road. All right, now we're ready to plasma cut this. Once again, just a cautionary tale. This piece that I'm going to cut out, I've got the plate clamped to the work table. Make sure that where you're cutting out this circle, that you're well overhanging the edge of your table so you don't cut into your table. All right, so here we go. All right, that's the notch for that, and then I'm gonna just cut off, while I got the torch going, I'm gonna cut the corners like I mentioned earlier. Woohoo! I like it when I win. Okay, so anyway, so that's pretty much ready to go. We'll dress that a little bit, get the dross off, and I'll grind the corners on this, and then we'll be ready for the next step. All right? Okay, well, we're almost done cutting. We only have a few more things to do. One, we need to cut the arm. This is going to be our arm that goes on the end of the pole so that we can attach work to that if we need to work overhead or at some other position. This piece that we have is way too long. There's no, almost all these things that I'm showing you are not keyed into any one dimension. You can certainly do these things to suit what your needs are. Because my table is a 12-inch plate, I want this to extend past the table a little bit. So I'm going to cut this a piece about 15 inches long off here, and then by the time I weld that to the plate, or to the pole, excuse me, and then some type of clamping device on the end, I'm going to end up being 17 or 18 inches out from the pole, which gives me clearance from the table so that I'm not necessarily bumping into the table while I'm working out of position. So that's one thing you want to keep in mind like that. So let me make this cut here. First we'll measure about 15 inches in. And we're ready to go for what's becoming closer to the final cuts that we're going to have to make with the plasma cutter. All right, here we go. So this piece will be our arm. And essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a notch. This is the smaller pipe, the one that's going to ride inside the larger pipe and be able to be adjustable. What I'm going to do is cut like a notch in here on both sides so that this will fit through in the center, but from the top it'll be kind of like that. I'm going to notch both sides so I have welds fore and aft and make it nice and strong. So that'll be our last plasma cut that we have to do, is the notches on this pipe. All right, so let me get set up to do that, and we'll get the last of the plasma cuts out of the way. Okay, well that concludes all the plasma cutting, and we have all of our pieces now basically ready to go. We have a few more things to do, but we've cut our stiffeners or gussets that we're going to use on both the base and underneath the tabletop. We've cut our arm, and then I've just cut the slot in the arm. I'm going to put that in there and weld that up there, so that's good and secure. And of course this is the piece that will be sliding in and out of the main post so that we have height adjustment. So now the pieces are all ready. Now what we need to do is we're going to get into doing a little bit of drilling. I'm going to drill some holes because our base, I think I mentioned earlier, that our base is going to be lagged to the floor, so we can be relatively small and not worry about tipping over. If you're doing this at home and you don't intend to lag it to the floor, you're going to have to give some consideration to the size and weight of your base so that you don't get too tippy. So anyway, we're going to mark and drill some holes there. And then because the one tube slides up and down inside the other, we have to have some way of stopping it from where it's going. So what I'm going to do is drill a hole in the larger tube, and then I'm going to weld a nut on there like so. And then I'm going to have this bolt be able to go through there, and when it goes through the hole and through the nut, it's going to hit on the inner tube and lock it in place. And what I'll probably do, I'll probably put some kind of a crossbar across here as well so that I can get some strength on that and not have to break out a wrench every time I want to make a little bit of an adjustment. So that's the plan, and we'll put that in operation next time around. So that's it for MIG Monday for now, and we'll see you next time. Well, if you learned something today or like what you saw, please feel free to subscribe and keep an eye out for new episodes every MIG Monday.